Hi, everyone. Natalie, are you there? I'm just checking to see. There you are.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. All right. Well, I think we should get started. It's just after 12 and we've got our hour together and we've got quite a few people online. So we're excited to have a nice audience here to hear Natalie speak. So my name is Jackie Rapat. I'm the Associate Dean of Research for the College of Rehabilitation Sciences, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our Illuminate series. Our Illuminate series is a monthly series where we are able to highlight the different research that's really exciting and relevant to our stakeholders and to our college, our students, our researchers, our faculty, and staff, and hear more about what they're doing. And today we're really pleased to have Natalie Houser, Dr. Natalie Houser, who's a postdoc fellow with our college, and will present her session today on moving towards a physical literacy enriched experience. I'm going to start by just doing, just providing acknowledgement and recognition and to the land and the space that we're currently inhabiting. And the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the OG Cree, and the Dene people, and are the homeland of the Métis Nation. In the time that we have together, we need to respect and honor the treaties that were made, and it gives us an opportunity to think about the harms and mistakes that we've made, and dedicating ourselves to moving forward in partnership with our Indigenous communities in spirits of reconciliation and collaboration. So I'm going to now turn it over to Natalie to provide her presentation. I think she's about half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. And then we'll have some opportunity for some questions, and I will help facilitate the questions at the end. You can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you to have a conversation with Natalie. So welcome, Natalie.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jackie. And it's my pleasure to share some of my work with you today. And thank you everyone who's joined from near and far, I think. So welcome. Like Jackie said, I'm Natalie Houser. I'm a postdoc at the University of Manitoba, and I'm going to be sharing with you some work around physical literacy with my presentation titled Moving Towards a Physical Literacy Enriched Experience. So a bit of a play on words there. We'll see how that goes. Thank you, Jackie, for doing the land acknowledgement. So I'll move forward to the topic for today. So what is physical literacy is what I'm going to try to tell you in the next 30 to 40 minutes. But before we get there, let's situate ourselves a little bit. So right now, we're all very well aware that we're living in what we might call a movement suppressed culture. So with things like these and computers and TVs, technology has sort of made it easy for us to be less active than we might have been in the past. And some of those technologies tend to be a bit more enticing than getting out and moving and experiencing movement. So what we're seeing right now, no surprise to anyone in the room, is lower levels of activity. Particularly in my world, I'm working with kids, and we're seeing that kids are a lot less active, moving a lot less than they typically would before. So one of the approaches that is often used is referring to the physical activity guidelines. So again, everyone is likely familiar with these guidelines. Essentially for children, encouraging them to move more, sit less, focus on their sleep. So focusing on all of the activities in which one would do within a day. Now, these have been around for many, many years now. And unfortunately, if anything, we've only seen a decline in physical activity. So despite our knowledge on what we need to do, so that what we're supposed to achieve, 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity, that's the goal. But unfortunately, that still doesn't seem to be enough to get people moving more, to get people active more, nor does the thought of be more active to prevent disease. These strategies don't seem to have worked so far as we've tried to create a more active society. So what I'm going to try to paint a picture today is sort of these differences between physical activity thinking and physical literacy thinking. So this is a picture of me actually a couple of weeks back on my first bike ride post ACL surgery. So if we think about this experience, this post surgery bike ride with a physical activity lens, here's some of the things we might think about. So I was able to bike 15 kilometers, the time it took me to bike, the calories that I expended. So all of these things are sort of extrinsic reasons why I was active. So from a physical activity lens, this is some of the stuff we might consider. Now, if I flip the script and think about this from a physical literacy lens. So when I had this first biking experience since surgery, these are some of the things that I felt in terms of a physical literacy lens. So obviously, this was a huge confidence building experience for me. The first time being able to ride again, obviously with that, working to regain some of that competency that I would have lost. And of course, the positive challenges that come with the opportunity to sort of get back to where I was before in terms of riding my bike, which is a huge motivational piece for me to continue to kind of go along that uphill battle of rehab and continue to progress. So if we think about this and keep this in mind as I go through my chat today, we're going to be focusing on thinking about things in terms of a physical literacy lens. So that intrinsic valuation of movement. So valuing movement because of reasons that we believe in instead of external reasons, such as meeting the guidelines. So with this thinking, we can connect physical activity and physical literacy to health. So this is the first model that essentially set up physical literacy as a part of health. So we're talking physical health, mental health, and social health. So the relationships that we see here are similar to that relationship that we'd see between physical activity and health, but now for the first time connecting physical literacy to different components of health. Now I've talked to you a bit about physical literacy now, but I haven't really told you what it is yet. So let's go there. So this might look a little bit daunting at first, but I'll take you through it. So this is what we call the physical literacy engine. And essentially it's a positive feedback cycle, which we like to take all of these different components into consideration in all movement opportunities. So if we start with movement competence, the idea is that within a certain movement experience, we have opportunities to improve our movement competence. And concurrently with that, the idea is that you set up an environment or an opportunity that allows for development of competence, so that physical ability, but at the same time allows for opportunities to develop confidence. So we have that sort of combined confidence-competence feedback loop that we try to target in all movement experiences. If we then follow that confidence arrow, we get to motivation. And as you see here, there are various different factors that influence motivation, and some of them not even on this page. But the idea here is that with the concurrent development of competence and confidence, we then result in a motivation to move more, leading then to active participation. And that feedback cycle continues. The idea here is that if we look at that active participation circle, there are various different arrows coming through that. So through facilitation of what we call positive challenges, we can ensure that there's opportunities for fun, pleasure, and enjoyment within a movement experience. We can talk about different opportunities for connection. So connecting with other people, connecting with your pet, connecting with different spaces, different environments. That opportunity for connection, also a motivator similar to fun, enjoyment, and pleasure. Also, if you look on the left, we emphasize the importance of being comfortable moving in different contexts. So the idea here is that because you have this physical literacy cycle activated, the idea is that you're comfortable moving in a range of different situations and contexts. So that would mean that as a Canadian, for example, I would suggest that most of us should be comfortable walking on land, moving on water, but also on ice and snow. So the idea here is that you have that confidence and competence to move in this range of different environments, and then also that you're comfortable moving with other people. So that's that social cultural context where we're comfortable moving with a range of different individuals in a range of different contexts. So when we look at this cycle as a whole, the idea is that we do what's called activate the cycle. So within a movement experience, you're targeting all of those different factors to then create a physical literacy enriched experience. So the engine you see in front of you, you were probably one of the first Canadian audiences to see it. So this was presented a couple of weeks back when we were in Sweden. And this is sort of the newest version. So you're one of the first to see this added version. So like I said, the idea here is that within a movement experience, we're activating all parts of the cycle. So you have opportunities to develop competence, confidence, motivation, and actively participate. So this is what I'll refer to as turning the cycle green. Now, alternatively, there's also the potential to turn a cycle red. This would result in sort of when the cycle is broken in one way or the other within a movement experience, which may result in a negative experience as opposed to a positive one. So if I break this down a little bit more with the two cycles, so NME, it refers to negative movement experience, and PME, positive movement experience. So if we think about any movement context in which we participate in, whether that's within a sport, a phys ed class, any movement context, the idea here is that there's the potential to accumulate both positive and negative movement experiences over time. So whether that's over the duration of a single class, or maybe a series of practices, or whatever it may be. So a series of time, you accumulate both positive and negative movement experiences of different magnitudes. So some may be less significant than others, which is identified by the different sizes of these cycles here. So the idea is that over time, you've accumulated positive and negative movement experiences. But the idea here with creating a physical literacy enriched experience is that those positive movement experiences will outweigh the negative movement experiences at the end of your participation in that activity. So if we get that positive net yield, the idea here is that happiness in physical activity is sort of our output. So what we get out of this experience is generally associating happiness in physical activity. Now, the reverse may also be true in some contexts where, unfortunately, you have a negative net yield of experiences. So you have more negative than positive. And this is where we see that individuals associate unhappiness with physical activity. And you can imagine how this might break down the cycle in various different ways. So I've got an example here of how that cycle might be broken down, and we might see that negative movement experience and that negative association with physical activity. So this is a study that was presented by myself and Dean Creelars at North American Society for Pediatric Exercise Medicine in the summer, called the Competence-Confidence-Happiness Cascade. And what we found is that between boys and girls, starting at the age of 6, we saw this competency gap between boys and girls. So we saw that boys were scored higher in terms of their physical competence than girls did. And this started at the age of 6 and went all the way to age 13. Now, subsequently, we saw that confidence was also different between boys and girls. So beginning at age 8, we saw that boys and girls had different levels of confidence. Again, seeing here that boys had higher confidence than girls did. So this began at age 8 and continued until age 13 as well. And then what we saw as a result of this is that when we asked these same kids how they associated happiness with movement. So the question is, I believe that being physically active makes me happier. When we asked that question to these kids, we saw, again, a similar shift where girls began to associate movement with happiness less than their male counterparts. So as you see there, by age 11, we're seeing that girls are associating movement with happiness at a lower level than boys are. And with that red dotted line, what that represents, as I have there, is the unhappiness threshold. So unfortunately, by age 12, girls are now actually associating physical activity with unhappiness. And this is clearly different than the boys who are in green, who are still in the happiness and physical activity category. So this is an example of how that figure on the previous slide may be exemplified in sort of the negative context of in the end associating movement with unhappiness, which may be due to a series of different negative movement experiences throughout different opportunities that they've had to move. So that was sort of a bit of a bad news story, but let's flip the script a little bit here and talk about how physical literacy may have some protective effects. There are a few studies so far that are hinting at the idea that physical literacy may have some potential protective factors for movement and otherwise. So one of the first studies I'm going to share with you here is done by some colleagues of mine looking at physical literacy and resilience in children. And what they found is that physical literacy is correlated with resilience. So what they found is that resilience was related to many of the different factors of physical literacy. So including what we talked about earlier in terms of competence. So resilience was related to competence, their confidence, and their motivation. So this is very new and demonstrates the potential psychological protective effects of physical literacy. In terms of sex differences in movement, like I just mentioned, we have some competency differences starting at age 6. So we're seeing these differences between boys and girls from a very young age. But what we've been able to demonstrate through physical literacy and through circus arts instruction in particular is that within one school year, this study was able to completely eliminate the gap between girls and boys in terms of their physical literacy. So in particular, their movement competence and also their confidence. So those gaps that we saw on the previous slide, this study managed to virtually eliminate those gaps, which is very promising. Another study I'll chat briefly about here is the impact on the pandemic. So myself and some colleagues of mine explored the impact of physical activity and physical literacy, on how it was impacted by the pandemic. So we had 160 children and their parents who answered some physical activity and physical literacy surveys for us before the pandemic. So in the spring of 2019, then we followed up with those same kids and their parents in 2020 in the spring. So that would be during the pandemic. So we found a few interesting things, some maybe not surprising, so unsurprising, but still unfortunate to report. 85% of children reported that they decreased in their physical activity levels. We also saw that according to children and their parents, that they believed their physical literacy had also decreased as a result of the pandemic. And beyond sort of the behavioral impact that we're seeing here, so less physically active, less physically literate, we also saw in this study that children decreased in terms of their valuation of movement, so how important they felt movement was. So we now are seeing not only this behavioral decrease, but also seeing a valuation decrease. So what they actually value has changed, and movement has kind of gone down the list on that. But the good news story of this study is that in those 15% of children who did not decrease in physical activity, those children were the ones who had the highest physical literacy. So again, sort of beginning to suggest that there might be some special and unique protective factors associated with physical literacy that might help us navigate away from this movement suppressed culture that I referred to earlier. So with that background, I'm going to share with you now some different opportunities for physical literacy development. So these are different examples of projects that I've been fortunate to be involved in that have worked to develop physical literacy in different ways. So there will be a series of different populations and contexts in which we're trying to do this. So the first I'll share here is related to physical literacy enriched pedagogy. And this is the main focus of my postdoc research here for the next 2 years, funded by SSHRC. And the main idea here is to investigate the pedagogical practices in the physical education context and from a physical literacy lens. So how can we better understand what's happening in phys ed from a physical literacy lens. And I'll just share this little clip here. So the idea in this example here, which is what we're trying to understand more, is this would be what they called a wheeled motion class. So instead of it just being a rollerblading class, so everyone is going to learn to rollerblade today. This was an opportunity for all students to choose which type of wheeled motion they'd like to use today. So you can see, I know the time lapse goes quite quick, but you can see there's individuals on rollerblades, but there's also individuals with tricycles, different scooters, all different types of wheeled motion. So they had that opportunity to choose. And to us, this is one way that we suggest might be sort of a more physical literacy enriched way of thinking. And the best way that we've seen so far to create a physical literacy enriched experience is through circus arts instruction. So this is sort of the basis by which we're trying to better understand physical literacy enriched pedagogy. So within one of the school divisions here in Winnipeg, there are multiple different circus programs running within phys ed. And the idea behind these programs is, of course, to support meeting the PE and health education curriculum objectives. But beyond that, circus arts instruction offers this opportunity to allow children to develop this movement voice. And what we mean by this is giving children the opportunity to choose the activities that they want to pursue within this circus context and develop within those, to develop that confidence and competence, to in turn develop physical literacy, as I've mentioned before. So just a little bit of a glimpse of what this circus program looks like, because it is quite phenomenal what's happened over the last couple of years here. So as you can see, the project started in 2016, where we had 3 instructors trained and 2 schools implemented circus arts instruction in phys ed. So all of the jugglers are phys ed teachers that have been trained at the National Circus School, and then each school implemented is that circus time. So what I really want to direct your attention towards here is those numbers in yellow. So those are the students exposed annually. So from 2016 to 2022, so this year, over 9,000 children have been exposed to circus arts instruction. And so far, as I mentioned in that paper earlier, we've seen not only the ability to decrease that gender gap in movement, but also just as a whole develop physical literacy of all students participating. And ideally with this, creating that positive movement experience, which unfortunately isn't always present in the phys ed context. So the impact of circus is being felt within the pedagogies that we're seeing in circus, where they allow for students to have a bit of autonomy in terms of what they choose to do that day and how they choose to participate. As most of the circus programs are, although they're implemented slightly differently at each school, the idea is that typically what we see is that it's almost a circuit style of circus program. So they have everything from aerials to unicycles to juggling, object manipulation stuff. So the idea is that there's something for everyone. And with that, there's also an opportunity to progress. So all of these different factors of an entry point for everyone, a level of challenge for everyone, opportunities for progression, these are all factors that help us develop physical literacy. And what we're seeing is that this thinking around progressions and offering opportunities for all to find their interests or their movement voice, we're seeing that thinking from those phys ed teachers is actually moving beyond the circus context. 2 examples in this division that stemmed from the thinking that they sort of gained through circus is some bike programs that the schools have now started, where they offer opportunities for all students to learn to bike. And the other one is rock climbing. And the idea here is that before circus and before this new physical literacy enriched thinking, many of these walls in this school division were boarded up, collecting dust, unfortunately not used very much. And since the sort of in physical literacy enriched pedagogy thinking entered the division, we're seeing that these rock climbing walls have gained a new life. And this is by sort of shifting their thinking a bit of not necessarily thinking about this as creating rock climbers, but creating individuals who can solve problems creatively and navigate different environments. So a shift in thinking has resulted in a significant change in how these spaces and movement opportunities are pursued. This thinking has also resulted in ideas around physical literacy and inclusion. So one of the projects we're working on right now, funded by the Teachers Idea Fund, which is supported by the province of Manitoba. This is looking at how can we make all school movement environments, including the phys ed and the gymnasium, how can we make all movement environments within the school inclusive to everyone? And in particular, what this study is focusing on is looking at how can we include individuals with neurodiversity into the phys ed class and have them participate alongside their peers. So this team is a very multidisciplinary team, including teachers, admin, PTs, OTs, and EAs. So it's a real team effort that's taking place. And we're just finishing up the first year of this study, and it's 5 years. And so some of our learnings so far, and one of them is the importance of the collaboration between individuals within the school. So one of the key ones here is the importance of communication between the phys ed teachers and the educational assistants. As this project is trying new things, trying new strategies, new approaches, that agreement and communication between the teacher and the EA has been critical, and it's allowed for an increase in comfort on both levels of where we can push the boundaries, where we can explore a bit, and other things where one individual is not comfortable, and we navigate that accordingly. But what we've learned in this process so far is also how modification of the environment and of the equipment that's used can successfully integrate all individuals within the phys ed classroom, which phys ed and the gymnasium can often be a space that's quite triggering to individuals with different sensory needs. So finding ways to strategically use equipment in a way that allows for all to participate has been a very impactful part of this study. So one example is the rollout mats that you see in the picture. These are used as you would typically imagine mats to be used, but they're also being used in this case for boundaries. So instead of relying on students to use the lines as boundaries, the mats actually provide a more explicit boundary to avoid things like unexpected collisions, those sorts of things. So just by simply strategically placing the mats, we've seen this decrease in anxiety of the teachers and the EAs in a movement space, which would have otherwise been quite chaotic and potentially hazardous. Another example here is looking at physical literacy and well-being in the early years in particular. So with some colleagues in Saskatchewan, I'm fortunate to work on a project called Nature's Way, Our Way. So the idea here is to co-create different physical literacy resources for Indigenous children and their families. So through the help of knowledge keepers and elders, we've developed a series of tools that that basically are different stories and games that are rooted in Indigenous teachings and traditional games. So we've been doing this project for about a year now, and working with different childcare centers across the province. It's been an extraordinary learning experience, and yeah, we're moving into working with more centers this fall. Shifting gears a little bit here, but I just wanted to sort of throw this in terms of the importance of considering environment when we're talking about all of the different opportunities that we have to develop physical literacy. So I gave you a few different examples of some of the studies that I'm working on and how these might contribute to physical literacy in different ways. And obviously each of these are in different environments and different contexts. So the idea here is that we also, not only can we offer opportunities to work with the people and how we can help them increase their physical literacy in that sense, but there's also an opportunity for us to work with the environment and create environments that are supportive of individuals moving within them. So the image here is probably familiar to many of you. This is the river. So this is right near the Forks. And last year I was fortunate to, for the first time, experience the amazing setup that is the Forks and the river system in the winter. And to me, this is a great example of how we can create an environment that is physical literacy enriched. And there's three main sort of design principles that we like to keep in mind when we're designing physical literacy enriched spaces. So the first one here is a level of challenge for all levels of ability. So within a single space, the idea is here that you have different opportunities for all to move. So depending on your situation, you're obviously going to have individuals with the range of different abilities, whether that's physical abilities, cognitive abilities, social abilities. We have to consider all of those when we're creating spaces for individuals to move. The second one here, a type of challenge for all interests. And this picture sort of exemplifies that quite well. If I am interested in skating, I have the opportunity to do that on the river. I also have the opportunity on the river to walk or fat bike or cross-country ski. And so within a single space, there's all of these different opportunities to move in different ways, depending on how I'm interested in moving. And the third one here is movement intersection, which is also exemplified quite nicely with the river setup. In terms of, I decide one day I'm going skating, and I'm skating on the river like those folks are doing. And I notice that someone bikes by on their fat bike. Oh, I never thought that I could fat bike on here. Next time I'm going to fat bike. So that movement intersection allows for us to be exposed to different types of movement and potentially give us new ideas as to how we might choose to move in the future. Like I mentioned, I was in Sweden last week and was able to see some fairly unique designs in terms of how we might create spaces that might facilitate movement opportunities. So here's an example of one community center, and they essentially designed their whole space with physical literacy in mind. And here's just a couple of the cool examples of things that they had set up that provided just different opportunities to explore movement. So the one in the middle is a slide that goes from the top floor to the bottom floor, which is very cool. And then you have different opportunities to climb up the stairs with the rock climbing type wall, or you can use the stairs. And then just some different climbing walls and different apparatus throughout the whole center. So just enriching movement in different ways within a single space, which is very cool to see. So with all of the different examples that I provided so far, it sort of leads to where I started in my PhD around physical literacy enriched communities. So all of these different pockets of research that I'm working on are essentially looking to build what we might call little gems of physical literacy around the community, which in the end, the idea here is that we accumulate enough gems within a community to develop a physical literacy enriched community. So the study that I did in my PhD with my SSHRC funding was to create a shared responsibility approach to physical literacy enriched communities. So we had a group called the Partners for Physical Literacy, which included members from sport, recreation, education. And the idea here was for all of these members to work together to create a physical literacy enriched community. So with this, we targeted individuals within 3 contexts, so within the home, school, and community context, with the idea that the accumulation of physical literacy gems within each of these contexts would allow for us to create an overall physical literacy enriched community. So throughout the 5-month intervention, we did see that these strategies that we implemented did increase the children's physical literacy. And we also saw that it changed the parents' perspectives of physical literacy. So an example of what some of the gems, I guess, that we created in this study, one of them would be we created physical literacy enriched lesson plans for phys ed teachers. Would be sort of a school level approach that we used. Within the community, an example would be that within their recreation programming, physical literacy was woven into their programming and their approaches. So with this, I'll kind of tie it up in a bow to suggest that physical literacy enriched communities require the work of a whole group, a whole lot of different people. Everyone in this room in some way contributes to how we might create a physical literacy enriched community. So to tie everything together today, I wanted to suggest that physical literacy enriched communities are not only dependent on the people, but also the places and programs in which we offer. So just again, tying this together, that we have anything from sport, school, rehabilitation, vocation, early childhood education, home, and performing arts that are all working together to create these physical literacy enriched communities. So I encourage you to think about how you might be able to create physical literacy environments in your context. And I'm happy to chat more about how you might do that. So I thank you so much for your attention today, and I look forward to the conversation we might have here.
Thank you so much, Natalie. What a really interesting presentation and some really great examples of a concept that I certainly have heard of, but didn't really have a good understanding of. So thank you for sharing that and helping us to better understand that term, even physical literacy. I'd like to open it up for questions now. So please either feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat, and I can ask it on your behalf if you would like. Let's give a minute before I jump in with a question, because of course others don't, but I would like to hear from others as well.
I'm Stephanie. I'm a speech therapist, and my area of interest is the neurodiverse population. And we very feebly, because I'm a speech therapist, very feebly promote moving together to increase social confidence and competence and motivation. And so decrease anxiety and develop relationship. And so I was really listening in for this idea of collaboration and movement coordination amongst partners. Do you have any wisdom that you can throw over the fence to a speech therapist?
I think this might be something that we maybe need to chat about beyond today, but I have some people that I can connect you with as well that are directly impacted. But yeah, I think what we've learned so far in this project is how important every member of that team that works with children with neurodiversity is, right? And understanding every child is different, and this is the same for individuals with neurodiversity. So yeah, I think one of the things that I'm going to leave you with maybe a silly response for now, but the communication between those folks working with the children has been a sort of an eye-opening to them in terms of how impactful and how much that can change the experience for the child and for the folks working with that child. So that was sort of a big aha moment for all of them. And one of the things that they've been working on is what the phys ed teacher is calling pre-teaching. So talking to the child before the class, okay, this is what we're doing in class today. These are sort of the opportunities that you have to prepare for what you're coming into. And that seems to have really had an impact on the experience that the children have when they do enter the space and they have that opportunity to prepare themselves for what's to come. But yeah, please reach out and I can connect you with more people for that.
Natalie, there's a question in the chat and it says, are there circus arts instruction programs in practice for early years preschoolers?
Ooh, Not that I'm aware of so far. We're just right now, as far as I know, they're just in elementary and middle schools. But there certainly would be potential to include some of the circus arts instruction in the early years. And there's a few of us that might be intrigued to explore that. So yeah, please reach out, Melanie.
Great. Other thoughts or questions?
Hi Natalie, I'm sorry if there's like geese honking in the background here. I'm right outside the U of M. So, okay, I had a question. Do you like the abilities of classmates, like in a class phys ed setting? Would those, if their abilities are high at a given task or activity, would that influence the physical literacy of their classmates? Like just that social environment?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so, and there's kind of different ways that we sort of try to navigate that within a class setting, right? Of things like not trying to put people on display or having all individuals moving at the same time. So it's one of those things where you almost feel a bit more anonymous in your movement. So you don't feel like everyone is watching you move. So that you each sort of have a bit of a more individualized experience and can progress at your level. Whereas because it's inevitable that within a phys ed class, for example, you're going to have that range of abilities, right? So finding ways in the way that you structure your class and the activities within your class is how we try to navigate that range of abilities and make it a positive experience for everyone, regardless of where they start.
Okay, cool, thank you. And then
Thanks.
just a quick follow-up, sorry.
Yeah.
Are there any studies that you know of like that have looked exploring that idea, like maybe homeschooled children versus like a public school sample?
Oh, I'm not aware of that type of study. That's a great idea, though. I don't know. There might be something out there. To my knowledge, I haven't seen it, but it's very possible. Yeah, thanks, Liam.
Highlighting all kinds of new research gaps.
Yeah, I got some new research ideas. Yeah.
That's great. Patty, a question or comment?
Yeah, I hope I can be brief. I'll try. So I'm really struck by, I do work more in the clinical setting and not explicitly about physical abilities, but self-management support, which is part of chronic care management, which has, it's supposed to have a coaching component. And so a lot of the things, there's a lot of resonance, right? So clinicians aren't supposed to be trying to get people to comply what they want them to do. They're actually supposed to help build self-efficacy in people's confidence, to try something new, to be realistic in what they try. There's a whole bunch of overlaps that I think are really like synergies, but I wondered if you could talk about sort of root theories that are based in this. So I heard self-efficacy theory is there, but are there others there that you can highlight? I appreciate this model, you know, it has come from its own body of work, but I suspect it's been integrated or orienting to some other pre-existing ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so you've sort of nailed one of them in terms of self-efficacy. We also have social determination theories in there. So in terms of the I don't think I have it close enough. I have an older model that sort of has, so basically if you think about those motivational factors, that's where we'll see a lot of different theories are coming from. So everything within the model, although not sort of referenced throughout the engine, are based on different theories, whether that's movement-based or psychologically based. So the interesting thing with physical literacy is because the majority of the factors are psychological, actually. There's only one physical factor there, really. So all of the different components of the engine do have different theories that are associated with them. That support sort of the overall cycle. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Cheryl.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. Many pieces definitely resonate. My expertise comes more from a motor behavior and motor development standpoint. So I'll maybe just respond quickly to that, to Patty's question. There's Haywood and Getchell's lifespan motor development talks a lot about Newell's model of constraints, which is certainly not all of the physical literacy components, but they talk very nicely about how we can change aspects of the task and the global environments and how they all interact together, which might provide some context there. My question was around the curriculum and the shift in curriculum, and something I've noticed across the different physical literacy environments that you were discussing, and also some of the comments I've had from some of my autistic participants that we work with, is that they like activities that include other people and that together, but are not a sport based where there's like a team achieving a goal. And so some common, like doing things outdoors together, going canoeing. I think the circus arts is such an excellent example of that, where you're working towards your own goals. So I use the term like an individual group activity. And I wondered from the curriculum standpoint, if you're starting to see any sort of movement towards a shift, because I find our physical education system is very much around this like basketball, volleyball, like these things that make it really hard when you have that variety of skill level in one space at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. So your question is very timely, Cheryl, in that the phys ed curriculum in Manitoba is currently being revised. And with that, the sort of one of the goals that they're striving for is to have physical literacy as sort of the framework by which the curriculum is followed. So with that, what that would mean is, like you're saying, not always just playing the sports, but having different opportunities, like different experiences outdoors, like the circus arts instruction, similar to the wheeled program that I showed you, where that offers an opportunity for everyone to move alongside each other, but doesn't necessarily need to be in pursuit of a goal of winning the game, sort of thing. And a lot of the setup that I'm seeing in terms of the physical literacy enriched strategies, there also are opportunities for when the context is potentially too, whether it's overstimulating, whatever the situation might be within that phys ed space, that there's an opportunity to still move within the gymnasium space, but maybe apart from the activity that's currently happening. So there's opportunities for them to choose other ways in which to move, where they can still move with their peers, but aren't necessarily in what may be a more chaotic environment than they're comfortable with at that time.
Yeah, I think one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is it taught us that even in Manitoba and the prairies and Saskatchewan, you can be outside in other times.
Yeah, and there's some schools that are outside all year round, so it's doable.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cheryl.
Great. Drew, do you have a question or comment?
Hi, Natalie. It's Drew Mitchell from Sport for Life.
Hi, Drew.
Coming to you from beautiful Penticton, British Columbia, where we have a much different circumstance in our school setting. We generally do not have phys ed specialists in the elementary model. Most of the provinces actually don't. Manitoba is a bit of a unique animal, no doubt about that. Sort of speaking on the front line aspect, I think, I really appreciated how that comparison between physical activity and physical literacy, and what I've always called the secret sauce of physical literacy being that competence, confidence, and motivation piece, which is really, I think, where people who deliver physical activity haven't maybe focused as much. And I think it's a great opportunity. We have a number of projects going on here in British Columbia and in Ontario that are showcasing, especially in the school setting, where a focus on physical literacy can really start to connect a lot of the dots. How people move can be really connected to how they learn, and then connecting to all support services in the district or the division. So it's been very interesting. So I really appreciated, and the new engine, of course.
Yes, yeah.
You and Dean have been working hard. I appreciate that, and thank you for all the work that you and the University of Manitoba are doing around this. This is really, really important as we move forward.
Yeah, and Drew, just kind of along your comment, there's someone once upon a time said something about how physical literacy brings everyone to the table. And I think you sort of illustrated that perfectly, and there's an opportunity to sort of, everyone can find their space in how they develop physical literacy in the population that they work with.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thank you for that comment. Allison, you have a comment or question?
Hi, thank you, Natalie. That was really informative. I come from the therapy kind of world and background, but I'm gonna ask you a question more with my mom hat on, because I have two young daughters, a 4.5 and 2-year-old, and I'm probably more aware than most parents about physical literacy and these discrepancies that might be coming down the way. And so I really want to encourage them to be active and to enjoy activities. And I find it a little bit of a balance between letting them do movement and then trying to correct them for doing movement. And I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts on, like, my daughter's all into showing me how she does her cartwheel, and her cartwheel is not a cartwheel. It's a little floppy move around the house, but I'm always so encouraging. Oh, great job. You're moving around, you're doing it, and learning little, like, baseball, like hitting a bat and things. So I find a balance. I have to kind of bite my tongue sometimes and just let them move and play and not try and correct them. But then I kind of your piece talking about confidence, like I want them to be a little confident in their skills. So maybe when they are doing more formal sports or activities that they can participate fully. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, again, for more of a mom hat of how to encourage, like, young children to participate and keep moving.
Yeah, for sure. I love that story. And yeah, I mean, at that age in particular, I would say, like, exploration of movement is kind of the big piece, right? Of just, like, being able to experience all of these different ways of moving, and then they'll eventually find the ones that that resonate the most with them and that they enjoy the most. And I think that's sort of the important piece early on, is, like, expose them to anything and everything, and then they'll find those things that they love and that they'll continue to pursue. And with that, obviously, is the big piece around confidence building. And I didn't speak to it much today, but sort of the opposite, of course, of confidence building would be confidence erosion. And in as much as possible, we try to sort of avoid those things that might erode confidence. And some of that might be language or behavior or those sorts of things. But yeah, I think kind of encouraging that movement at this point in time is like the way to go, and that those positive feelings that they are now associating with movement, and obviously very proud about their cartwheels. Eventually what we see is that sort of the confidence and competence sort of come together a bit more. So at age 4, you could ask them if they can backflip off a horse, and they probably would say they could. But eventually they'll sort of recognize, okay, these are because of the experiences that they've had in movement. They recognize sort of what they are able to do reasonably. So that confidence and competence kind of come closer together as they get a bit older. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for that question.
Thanks. We're just about out of time. I see, Drew, you have your hand up still. I don't know if that's.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
You had another question? Okay, perfect.
No, I'm good. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Well, I think given that we're almost at 1 o'clock, I'm going to thank Natalie on behalf of College of Rehabilitation Sciences. We're really excited to have Natalie with us for another year, right? I believe it's a full year.
Yep.
In her postdoc position. And so encourage people to reach out to Natalie it sounds like there's lots of interest and potential other areas of research. So you've got your whole program of research starting to lay out in front of you, Natalie. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I'll just put my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much for everyone's time today and great questions.
Great. Thanks, everyone.